Hello, welcome back to FPL IQ. I'm Rob, aka FPL Hall, and I'm joined once again by teacher FPL Lucian. And today is a pretty important FPL side. I think you might agree with that one. Tottenham Hotspur are on the agenda today. New manager, few new players in there, new tactical style. I think a lot of the fans have been happy with the small glimpses of what they've seen from Spurs so far this season. They might not have got the result against West Ham, but the amount of shots that they've been taking and efforts that they've seen in game, they might enjoy watching football at the London Stadium again. But before we get into predicted lineups and play styles under Big Angie, Lucian, how are you? How are you feeling about Spurs?
Absolutely excited, Rob. You have no idea. Like, it's one thing bringing a new philosophy as well as innovation to the league, but now that we have to say that at this time of recording, we have witnessed all three friendlies that Spurs have played, we can at least attest to the new philosophy that Postecoglou is trying to implement. And at the same time, he's being humble about it. He's going, there are bits and pieces where the Spurs players are still showing old parts of themselves that he's trying to iron out previously under Conte. So it's good to see that they're already doing well and there's so much more room for improvement. So that's fantastic to see. Really exciting stuff.
So we'll go into predicted lineups and the formation that they could be setting up as, and then we'll go into strengths and weaknesses, and then players to potentially pick and avoid. So starting off with a 4-3-3. This is a popular formation that he's used before. We've only had a few games of actually going to play Barcelona. So I think if people are still looking at starting the season with Spurs players, because some of them might wait till game week 3 or 4 when fixtures get on a really good run for Tottenham Hotspur, this Barcelona fixture, I think, is really going to show us some good information. You don't obviously put too much weight on preseason games, but allowing yourself to see an attacking, possession-dominated side with talent like Barcelona against Spurs in this situation could be a really good one. So 4-3-3. I've put Vicario in net here, the new goalkeeper, with a question mark. Lloris is still there, but I think Lloris is done, and I think it is going to be him over Forster in goal. In defence, a little bit different then. So it looks like they've ditched the 3-back formation. I've got Porro at right back, Destiny Udogie at left back, who they did sign before but loaned him back to Udinese. People think he's going to start. And I've got Romero with a question mark over Dyer, because this could be Davis. People might also think that Porro might not start at right back. They might start with something a bit more solid, because he's very good at attack but not necessarily at defence. And Davis could start at left back over Destiny. When we're talking about Spurs, we're not looking too much in the defence right now. So into the midfield, I have got Højbjerg and Bissouma. Could be Bentancur, could be Skip. It looks like Bissouma could be the more box-to-box with Højbjerg as the 6. But again, they're not the players we're interested in. It is the front half of the pitch. It's all the other players that we're really going to be interested in. The first one is new signing James Maddison, who's obviously going to be the more advanced of those 3 midfielders. Up front, you've got Kulu and Son, and question mark still over Harry Kane. The deadline was passed. They gave them till last Friday, and again, they've come in and today have come out and said that they're going to come back again. So there are still question marks over Harry Kane. But to start game week 1, the fact that we just have a few sort of days or a week left or so till we start, I just can't see. I can't see him not being there for game 1. It's all up in the air, but we just play with what we've got right now. So, new manager, new system, couple of first team changes in the 11. How are you feeling about this Spurs side?
Well, I think Spurs, confidently we can say now after watching preseason, is one of those sides that transitions into a different formation once they attack. Just like most sides, Postecoglou has already been doing the whole inverting his fullback into midfield thing ever since his Celtic days. There's a lot of documentation on that, his transition from a 4-2-3-1 to a 4-3-3. And really the key transition we are looking at is central midfield, actually, the irony here. The nice thing about Spurs is that even though, as you've already mentioned, they've abandoned the three at the back system, in attack, they still morph into a three defense system. So, a popular concept here is that one of their fullbacks, most of the time Poro, would shift in with the two centre backs across preseason. That would be Davis and Romero, and they would just have a solid three-man back line. And this is where Udogi's positioning really catches the eye. The reason he's making a lot of drafts is because Udogi doesn't just sit in defensive midfield. He goes beyond Bissouma, he goes beyond Pape Matissa, he goes all the way up front just to play this underlapping fullback role where his left winger, whether it be Mana Solomon or Heung-min Son, plays out wide and Dogi just charges into that left half space. If not, it would be James Maddison himself. So yeah, this 3-1-4-2 or 3-2-4-1 system really catches the eye, especially when you have so much overload on that left side or the right side, depending on which fullback bombs forward. So I think we should start getting into it.
Yeah, we'll go into the strengths. So something that the Spurs fans are going to be happy about, and something that as FPL managers we're usually interested in their attack, and that looks like it is going to be the key focus. It feels like the way that that Big Ange sets his side up is we're going to score more goals than you. And Spurs have that attacking quality to do that. For a few years now, we've not particularly liked the Spurs defense, but not last season, but previous seasons, Heung-min Son has been fantastic. Harry Kane is still one of the best FPL assets you can have, and if Kulusevski gets that final place up front, and he looks like he's ahead of Richarlison, then that's a budget option. I think the whole attacking form for this team is extremely strong. And then the addition of Maddison, a player I really love. I've always said he's at Leicester and he was putting things on plates for the likes of Iheanacho or Vardy or Daka. And we were looking forward to him to being in a side like this, where in the past it's just been Kane and Son, Son to Kane, Kane and Son, sometimes a bit of Kulu. They've missed that creative midfielder since Eriksen left. And Maddison has now got two world-class strikers I'm calling Son a striker here, but Son and Kane in front of him. That is just a delicious meal for a central attacking midfielder like James Maddison. So the points potential across the board, because of the way Big Ange sets his sides up, and because Maddison's going to be feeding the balls through now, the whole attacking potential increases. And that's what he's going to bring. He's going to bring goals. And as FPL managers, we don't look at the defense. If we want goals, I don't care if Spurs lose 5-4, because if I've got Son or Kane, they're probably going to get some goals in that match. So he's also known for having no compromises in this style of football. A popular example is when he was Celtic manager, I think they played Real Madrid. I'm not disrespecting Celtic, but there's a big difference between Celtic and Real Madrid. But they went out and they didn't change. They got thumped, but they went out and they got changed. Spurs have a higher quality side and less likely to get thumped like Celtic did in that situation. So that could be good news for people investing in the Spurs attack. But on the other hand, he's ruthless. He apparently stays distance to his players, meaning this is a little bit of a weakness I'm slipping in here, is the fact that when Son was on a cold streak, it took a long time for him to get dropped or to get subbed early. That might change under Big Angie, but on paper, this Spurs side should be screaming more goals, and that comes from the stats that we've seen in the friendlies, where they're posting ridiculous numbers of amounts of attempts on goal. But the quality of opposition that they've faced hasn't been particularly strong. West Ham's had a poor pre-season. They played a team that I'm not even sure exists was it in Singapore that they played them? And they played a very weak Shakhtar side with some injuries and some youth players making like debuts in that game. So that's why I'm saying that this Barcelona game is going to really help us to understand what this Spurs side is going to look like. How are you feeling about the strengths of this Spurs side?
There are just so many, but I'm just going to highlight the top three because there will be a thread that I will release literally tonight. But at the time of the release of this recording, it would have been out for a few days now. What I've done is that I've studied the 3 preseason games that Spurs have gone through, just to analyze the key principles that give Spurs a competitive edge over their rivals. And one of the biggest things is transition into attacking positions. See, the thing about FPL, at least that we've known and loved, is that we always like to pick players that are the furthest ahead in terms of formation. We like playing players that are in the number 10 role specifically so that he feeds a striker or a winger or an inside forward or whatever it is. The thing about Big Angie's philosophy is that number one, he actually likes having his creative midfielders move into the dangerous situations, not starting there. So a lot of what Maddison does is that he actually operates as a number 8 alongside the 2 central midfielders, Pape Matar as well as Yves Bissouma. And then, as the ball progresses up the wing, when the ball reaches Heung-min Son, Maddison himself would bomb into the half spaces. Very, very similar to Kevin De Bruyne, the way he does it for Man City. And this is where finally James Maddison truly shines. Because if you think about it, when Maddison played for Leicester, Maddison was basically the number 10, and he has so much burden creating for others while somehow creating shots for himself through set pieces. Similarly at Spurs, you're looking purely at that front three to work with each other rather than bring in a fullback or a central midfielder to shoot from range. Everything was so isolated. 7 defenders and 3 attackers. Whereas now, Postecoglou has basically implemented this system where you have 1 player or 2 players break into 1 key danger zone just to provide a goal threat or an assist threat, and everyone else is already in position to score. This is what we have seen across the multiple friendlies, and the philosophy is there. The other real key strength, as you've already mentioned, is the refusal to stop at 1-0. When Spurs were leading against Shakhtar Donetsk, 1-0. Around halftime, they started playing defensive. They started being practical, and there were points where Højbjerg in central midfield, he had the ball, right, and he just lumped it forward because they were like 5 minutes to halftime, and Postecoglou was not happy. He was just there, absolutely furious at his guys. And that is really the mentality that Spurs are going to do moving forward. Like, it doesn't matter what the scoreline is, they will attempt to play their brand of football, regardless of game state, regardless of team advantage. And that's fantastic to see. That is something that we, as FPL players, can most certainly capitalize on.
Looking at the players, like I said about Højbjerg, I don't think he would have been in the starting lineup. Bentancur is out till I think November-ish. I think it could be him or Skip in there, but they've gone and signed the centre back now, Van der Ven, which is one place that they really need to improve. And if they go out there and they got one more defensive midfielder, like a 6, let Bissouma be the box to box and go out there and get a defensive midfielder, they could be really making amends and a difference this season. But we're going to come on to the weakness, and that is to do with the mentality. Have they got over the season? So like Liverpool and Chelsea, Spurs just had a season to forget. Issues with the camp. Kane hasn't been named as captain. Lloris is still club captain. He's still there. Question marks about have they got over such a poor season and all the managers and all the different systems that they've got used to so far. And now this is a completely different kind of system. Have they got used to it, or will they be ready in time for game week 1? Chelsea's cleared out a lot of bad players, and they've brought in a known successful manager in Pochettino. Liverpool have been much better since following the World Cup. They've got rid of some of their older players and brought in some fresh blood as well, and they still have Klopp, an experienced manager. And I'm not trying to put down what he's done at Celtic, but he doesn't have a particularly high level of experience at the top of the game. And could that be an issue. You know, he's someone who doesn't compromise, and he has his style of play, and the problem that is the lack of experience to maybe make something else or something different, to change a game differently, where he's just not got that top level experience right at the top of the game. Defensively as well, Spurs were the 6th worst team for goals conceded, and the likes of Forster and Dyer, who are likely not going to start game week 1 now. Van de Ven, it might be too early for him to go straight to the side, but we'll have to wait and see. But for the moment, they could be going in with a similar back line. Destiny Udogie is looking like he's had a good start to pre-season, but he's still not being tested in the Premier League. Porro is great attacking-wise, but it could be Royale who starts, because defensively that he's not particularly quite there in the Premier League yet. Going to a back 4 instead of a back 3 potentially could solve a lot of these problems, but the fact that that defensive personnel is still similar, and they're the 6th worst team in the Premier League for goals conceded, that is bad. And even this pre-season, they've had so many shots and scored a few goals. They've conceded not a lot of shots and conceded like every shot on target that they've had. It's worrying. But again, from an FPL point of view, we don't really look at Spurs for the defense. We look more at the attack. And in terms of attack, it's that fight to keep Harry Kane, and that fight to keep Harry Kane happy. Is he going to stay at the club? He was promised moves before. He stayed. He's signing new contracts. He's been promised moves again. They've come in now actively, Bayern Munich, saying, we want him. Here is the money. And they're still not letting him go. And it felt like the last time he was refused leaving Spurs, it felt like it did seep onto the pitch a little bit. Is that going to happen again this time round? We're going to have to wait and see. And last season, the whole weight of the goals from this side came from Harry Kane. And if he's not there, that's going to be a huge problem. A mini plus could be Richarlison coming in as a 7 million midfielder to play a striker, but he's no Harry Kane. And I completely agree with them refusing 85 million for him, because he's worth more than that, even just for one season, if he can get you in the Champions League. My just as a side note, it's a gamble, but I just feel as though they've refused 85 million because his goals could get them in the Champions League, which is worth more than 85 million. And if they keep signing defenders and other players like Maddison, he might stay. He might resign, and you know, they're finally going to try and match his ambitions. But that's just a wait and see. But that's what I've got from the weaknesses of this. What are you feeling about weaknesses about Spurs?
Originally, before studying their friendlies, I didn't think that there was anything attractive about Spurs, because really Harry Kane was powered by a lot of penalties. We have to admit that. Penalties and set pieces. So the question comes down to whether Spurs were going to win that many set pieces and penalties to begin with. Again, you know, we have to reiterate that the previous version of Spurs depended a lot on Son Heung-min and Kulusevski individually. There were virtually no partnerships all across the pitch until Maddison came in. That being said, across the 3 friendlies, we still have not really truly seen partnerships all across the board. Spurs need to have the ball in that 1 or 2 specific area in order to shine. And right now, it still looks like their left wing is far, far more productive than their right wing, because Pedro Porro just isn't the type of defender that makes those underlapping runs into the half space down the right side. In fact, it's actually Emerson Royale that does the better job. There was this point against Lion City in Singapore where Spurs were absolutely dominating the ball, right? And they had their front 4. They had Kane, Maddison, Kulusevski, Son, all lining up in the box. And their biggest creator was Pedro Porro. But Porro was basically in line with the central midfielders, and he just crossed from deep. And you can foresee Spurs being frustrated to that extent, because Spurs, by hook or by crook, still are full of a lot of great crosses of the ball. Son Heung-min was another guilty party of crossing way, way too often, especially in the game against Shakhtar Donetsk. Like, if you look at it in the stats, right, counting crosses alone, Son had 8 crosses himself, with almost none of them falling for Udogie on that same side. And that was basically the highlight of Spurs in the first half. It was no surprise that they went into the halftime, level at one apiece. I think it just goes to show that Spurs will still carry some of their baggage and their old habits from the previous managers, where a lot of their star talents are very self-reliant. They will not completely subscribe to the new system, and especially in terms of their fullbacks, their output will almost certainly be inconsistent at best. So as much as I like Udogi and Poro as some of our starting defenders that I've seen in some drafts, we cannot have them classified as the unicorn defenders that has attacking and defensive output potential. Instead, I would say that the left side arguably is the more creative side, but they are not necessarily the side with the highest assist potential, because whenever the left flank creates, the right flank might not be the one scoring. In fact, there were some instances where Son and Maddison overloaded the left flank. They did it against West Ham, they did it against Shakhtar, and a lot of it resulted once again in crosses from deep. In fact, one of those crosses from Maddison resulted in one of the Kane goals. So in that sense, they will revert to type. They might not necessarily play the whole bombarding, buccaneering runs into the box style of play, but they will alternate between creating from the left, and once in a while you will see Kulusevski instead receiving the ball from the left flank and creating for Kane himself. So really the true weakness I feel for FPL is that the goals that Spurs will score will be spread out all across the front four. And if Richarlison comes into the frame, it will be a front five. We've not even talked about Perisic, who has every chance of making it into the squad. In fact, Udogi himself can be rivaled by Sergio Reguilon's runs into the box, who has actually featured against West Ham in their first friendly. So competition is everywhere. And I think bar Son, Kane, and Maddison, everyone else is a potential risky rotation spot.
All right, so let's go into our top picks. I think we have both have the same one for this. Maddison, I was singing his praises earlier. He gets to set up the likes of Son and Kane. He's going to be getting forward. He's going to be getting to the box. Looks like he's already got a link with setting up goals for them already. Did a lovely bit of skill inside the box as well. I've always rated him highly as an FPL asset if he can stay fit. That's just usually an issue with him, fitness. But the fact that he's with a mid-table to a now relegated team for a few years, and he was still getting the returns. So I can only imagine if he's set free in midfield to get forward as well as set up Son and Kane, I think he's the man to go for. Second choice, I've gone for Son. He said, recently that last year he was basically injured. Now he's had an operation and he's fully fit. 9 million for a player that in the past has been worth 12 million plus. I don't think he's gone terrible overnight. He's staying at Spurs because he feels like he's got something to prove. So I think he's also excellent, and he's easy to get to now because a lot of us will have 8 to 8.5 million midfielders that we can easily go and find 0.5 million for him if you don't have it in the bank already to try and get to 9 million. And then just as a little one, I did put Richarlison, and that's just if Kane leaves, just because you've got a 7 million out of position player there. But if he does stay, then I would probably switch to Kulusevski because he's still probably pretty nailed in that side. But like I said, they're not as active down that side. The only thing that puts me off Son a little bit is in the past he's been more central, basically like a striker with Kane. If this is a more conventional 4-3-3, Son could end up a little bit wider than I would like from my players, which is a thing I've talked about Salah before. I feel as though if Trent is not getting down the outside, that means Salah has to be on the outside. If Darwin's in the middle, that means Salah has to be on the outside, and that's a little bit how I feel about Son at the moment. But Maddison, a clear, excellent number one. Kane's just not on the list because it doesn't work out money-wise, and I don't know if he's going to stay. If Kane came out right now and said, I will stay at Spurs, then he'd obviously be in the top three. It's just that big question mark still. Is he going to stay or is he going to go? What about your top three for these guys?
Well, if you want confirmation bias, there it is. James Maddison is hands down the central striker in Spurs 3-3-4. I really have to declare it a 3-3-4 here because after NG's movements from fullback into midfield and from midfield into attack, really Spurs look like a 3-3-4. Your observations are spot on. Son is all the way out on the left flank, Kulusevski is all the way out on the right, and you see Kane and Maddison in the middle. Like, I'm not even saying that they only look like this in attack. There were some points, I think it was the third goal that Shakhtar conceded against Spurs, where Maddison actually pressed the goalkeeper all the way from the number 8 position. So the wingers cut off the fullbacks, right? And the centre backs have no choice but to pass it into midfield. But Maddison does such a good job at pressing the centre backs that they go all the way back to the goalkeeper. Now, this is where Spurs spring their counter press trap. And the moment Spurs win the ball back, you immediately notice Son and Kulusevski are in between the lines, right? They have the ball, but the two players in front of them are Maddison and Kane. So really those two, without a shadow of a doubt, are my top two, Maddison and Kane. Of course, Maddison is the clear head and shoulders above everyone else because he's a midfielder and he is 5 million cheaper than Kane. So my second choice would still be Harry Kane, because no matter what way you look at it, Kane's on penalties, Kane's a goal poacher, and if Maddison's not in the half space, Kane himself would actually be in the half space. There was this instance against Lion City where Maddison, as the number 8, not the number 10, he dropped all the way in line with the central midfielders, and he was the one that played the beautiful, long curved Enzo Fernandez style pass all the way out wide for Son and Udogie to work together, and that was when Kane attacked the box. So there will be instances where people will notice Maddison drop deep, and this is where Kane will pick up the slack. So really the top two picks are Maddison and Harry Kane. The third pick's a bit tricky because it's like 50-50 for me between Udogie and Kulusevski. But at the moment, I'd still prefer the safe minutes of Kulusevski on the right side. So even though he's not as involved, he's not as active, Kulusevski does at least have ability to set Kane up for assists. But really, after Maddison and Kane, it's really, really slim pickings in terms of our FPL interest. So yeah, those are my top picks.
Yeah, Kulusevski is 7 million as well. So if you can't stretch and you want someone in there and you can't, or you want to double up for some reason when Spurs have a good fixture and after game week 3, there's far worse options out there. Brighton's fixture sort of turn game week 3, game week 4 to more difficult. So if you've got someone like a Mitoma and you've already got Maddison, 6.5 to 7 million isn't the worst. If we are going on to weaknesses now, it's basically for me just the entire defense. Goalkeeper, I already said earlier, they've conceded a lot of shots and they've all gone in, and they still leak goals, and it's going to take the new players time to bed in to get used to his system and to stop leaking so many goals. And Porro is 5 million. There are so many better 5 million options out there. You can get an Arsenal, you can get United, you can get a Chelsea, you could get a really top defender for 5 million. Just not worth it. If I had to go, I'd probably go for Destiny, but I just feel as though the entire defense and goalkeeping situation at Spurs is still a definite avoid for me.
Players to avoid. Well, this is going to sound controversial yet again, but Son is definitely the one to avoid for now. I know a lot of people see potential in him, and they see him having a lot of initiative and drive. I just see that at the moment, that very drive is hurting Spurs. Son is much better being in the dangerous positions, receiving balls from the right side, and it just doesn't look like that at the moment. So unless Spurs somehow start creating from the right side, Son is the one managing most of the ball on the left, and if he's not careful, I can definitely see Mana Solomon coming in just to give him competition, to make sure that either of them subscribes to NG's philosophy. Because there were times that I did notice that whenever Son had the ball on the left flank, you'd see Udogie run all the way into the 6-yard box, if not Maddison, and Son would basically ignore all of them. Part of the reason they were so frustrated against Shakhtar in the first half was because Son himself would be crossing again and again, and Kane would be the one marked out, and the ball would go all the way to the far post just to be reset by Kulusevski or Emerson Royale. And that's the frustrating thing about Son at the moment. So yeah, Son for me is the trap. The defense, I don't mind. I mean, no one's really had interest in the Spurs defense besides Udogie or Porro. They might come good. It really comes down to the nature of how they win games rather than whether they keep clean sheets. Angie's already said he'd rather win 4-3 than 1-0, so we've got to believe him. And we should expect the 4-3 wins instead of the 1-0s.
And what I said about Son earlier and what Angie's like is he will drop anyone if you're not performing. So Solomon could come in, Richarlison could come in. And, you know, he got an extended stay of execution at times, I think, Son, last season when he should have been dropped maybe earlier than what he was. But one bold claim I'll make before we give our ratings for this side is I wouldn't honestly be surprised is we are thinking that if Kane goes, Richarlison will be the one to go into that striker role. I would make an argument that Son would go down the middle and Richarlison would be coming in as one of the wide players. And if that happens, a 9 million Son at striker could be one of the best assets in FPL. Because Son is like a striker. His finishing is top class. Year after year, his conversion ratio is like the best in Europe. He can play as a striker, and in this kind of role, he's not really a winger. That Richarlison has played out wide before several times. I just wouldn't be surprised that if Kane went, Richarlison could go into that wide place and Son could be down the middle. But that's just a bold claim I'm making at the end here. So out of 10, I'm going to give Spurs an 8 or 9, to be honest, because if you do go 2 players and you don't want Salah, Kane is one of the best options in FPL. He finished just behind, Haaland, who is in like everyone's team. If you have some belief in what Son can be like and return to his old ways, he's fantastic. We've already sang a lot of praises to do with Maddison. Kulusevski's 7 million if he plays. Richarlison, if he comes in and Kane leaves, is 7 million. They're all well priced. They've got great fixtures, especially from like game week 3 for consecutive game weeks that look pretty good for them. I just think they're a really solid choice that many might not start with because we want to give Angie and the new system and looking at Kane and all that for a couple of game weeks. But I wouldn't be surprised if Spurs is that first bandwagon team that gets jumped on from game week 3, where a lot of people go from Brighton midfielders to Maddison, or they don't want Salah and they're going to go for Kane instead. Or maybe they don't want to go for Bruno Fernandes because he's sharing his attacking positions with Mount, so they pump up 0.5 million to Son. I think Spurs could be one of the early teams. Spurs and Chelsea, I think, will be the first 2 teams people will shoot towards when we've finally seen them in competitive football. How would you rate Spurs out of 10?
7.5, the perfect reflection of James Maddison's price in FPL. Yeah. Simply because that's going to be the topic of conversation in game week 3. I think a lot of people now are starting to own Salah in their drafts. And as people discuss the strategy around owning Salah, really the reason we own Salah is because we know that after game week 2, after the home game against Bournemouth, we know for sure who is the regular starter for Liverpool up front. Now, that also means that downgrading Salah to a 7.5 like Luis Diaz or, an 8.0 like Diogo Jota, right, is going to allow us to fund all these moves like whoever we want into Harry Kane, for example, or picking up a Rashford or a Bruno Fernandes and things like that. But really, it is the 7.5 million midfielder bracket that everyone will aim for, such as Maddison, Phil Foden, Kai Havertz. It's all going to be up there. So really that's what I feel their score should be. Perfect.
Excellent. Yeah, Spurs are a popular side we all want to look at, especially in attack. I think, like I said earlier, they're going to be popular. So that's it for our look at Spurs. The next one, it's going to be the Hammers, who have lost captain and key man Declan Rice. They have just apparently replaced him, but we'll talk about more about West Ham in the next video. But thanks for joining this one about Spurs. Let us know in the comments below how you feel about their assets. Are you going to start the season with them or wait a few game weeks until you invest in this side? Thanks a lot for joining us, and as always, have a good one.